I'd like to dedicate this to Gilbert Gottfried, who passed away today. And in lieu of my speech, I'm going to do a 10-minute invocation of the aristocrats. That just made Casey shiver. The aristocrats. All right. So does it say it? Yeah, okay. But you guys don't need a joke. What you guys need is a story. Oop. Pace yourselves. It's a marathon, not a sprint. In order to tell the story of Rough and Ready, we need to step back a little bit in time and shift halfway across the country. The year is 1832, and we're in the middle of the Black Hawk War. Oops, hang on. Wait, yeah. The Black Hawk War occurred between April and August of 1832, when Native American leader Black Hawk of the Sac tribe, along with members of a couple of other tribes, crossed the Mississippi into Illinois, aiming to reclaim land lost in the Treaty of St. Louis. On the opposing team, you have a bit of an all-star cast. Batting first is Abraham Lincoln, the pride and joy of Illinois in his first military at-bat. Lincoln doesn't see any combat himself, but this war does give him his brief military service. The next batter, and soon to switch over to the opposing team, is Jefferson Davis, the soon-to-be president of the Confederacy. That is the correct response. Coming in third in this presidential lineup is Zachary Taylor, later to be known as Old Rough and Ready, the namesake of our story. Now, batting cleanup is my man Winfield Scott here. Look at this majestic beast. This dude looks like he's going to offer you a sweet deal on term life insurance or tell you where to get decent test strips for your diabetes. He was general for 47 years and served for 7 presidents. Scott Street here in San Francisco is named after him, as Taylor Street is named after Taylor and Lincoln Street is named after Lincoln. Davis Street? Not so much named after Jefferson Davis. But look at Winfield Scott here. Look at him. And you know if Zachary Taylor had a sweet nickname, that Winfield Scott here is going to have a fantastic nickname too. And he did. He was known as Old Fuss and Feathers. Of course, this guy's nickname is Fuss and Feathers. He's glorious. Look at him. Now, fighting underneath Zachary Taylor was a man by the name of Absalom Austin Townsend, this guy right here. Absalom Austin is a bit of a tongue twister for a talk like this. So for the rest of the tale, I'll just refer to him as Double A. Prior to the Black Hawk War, Double A lived in Illinois in the business of mining, which meant at the time that he was smart, not only dabbled in mining, but also in the business, the lucrative business of outfitting miners with equipment, animals, and provisions. After the war, Double A moved to Wisconsin and got into the lead mining business there and did pretty well for himself until news came of the discovery of gold in California. Apparently not one to miss an opportunity, and already in the mining business, Double A rounded up 8 other men, 12 wagons, oxen, the whole 9 yards. On an April 16th, 1849, they headed out west. They did take a good portion of the Oregon Trail, so this slide is not totally inaccurate. They named their group the Rough and Ready Company in honor of the freshly sworn-in president. Just under 6 months later, September 1849, the company crosses into California, and a few miles west of Grass Valley, they stop for a rest, and while grabbing a drink down at the local stream, one of the members of the team looks down into the water and spots a giant gold nugget. It doesn't take long for them to realize that this is probably a pretty good place to start a mining camp. They decided to name the camp ultimately the town after Old Rough and Ready. Now, I know what you're thinking. Rough and Ready is a strange name for a town. And I can't argue with that. At one point, there were actually 3 Rough and Ready Californias. And I think to myself, that's weird, naming your company after a president. But then I realized in this day and age that if the West was being settled, there'd be a whole bunch of Trump towns in the Midwest and a whole bunch of Bidenvilles on the coasts. So we're not that far off. Now, you have to remember the type of mining they were doing in Rough and Ready wasn't the pickaxe kind of mining. It was the stream and mining pan kind of mining. The company does really well in the first year. In the end of 1849 season, they break down their tents, build a double log cabin over the winter, and in the spring, they start panning again. AA takes out $15,000 worth of gold from the streams during that season, and when the streams dry up, he decides to head back to Wisconsin, get more men, get more gear, and head back to Rough and Ready for the fall. Now, don't think I've forgotten about this crowd participation part of this equation. It's as important to me as it is to you. The first thing we have to think about, the first thing we have to know is the wizardry of how AA got rich. Back in Wisconsin, as I mentioned previously, AA made a bunch of money in lead mining. In California, he made all his money in gold. So he effectively turned his fortune from lead into gold, which is alchemy, which is a... Thank you. When AA traveled from California to Wisconsin to restock, he traveled much like people, like the mail traveled in that time, down the West Coast, across Panama, back to the mouth of the Mississippi via sailing and steamships of the time. Now, once back in Wisconsin, AA got more men, more materials, and set off back to Rough and Ready via the overland route as before. Thank you for your participation. Now, when AA returns in September of 1850, he doesn't return to a handful of men and a double log cabin this time. He returns to a town of 500 people. Apparently, somebody's boat had a leak in it, and word got out that there was gold in Rough and Ready. And it became a little boom town, so much so that when AA arrived there were so many mining claims staked that he had to buy into other people's claims just to work the land. He ended up letting his men work for other people, doing some light mining himself and selling equipment to the locals. Early in 1851, he decided to pack it all up and head back east permanently. But it's okay. He got involved in state politics and more gold mining. He was fine. Oops. But it's what happened between when AA left and when he came back that's the reason I'm up here tonight. When AA was away, two events happened that led to the entire town deciding to walk away from the Union. The first event was when Zachary Taylor, old Rough and Ready himself, realized that gold in California was making a lot of people rich, and he wanted his government's slice of the pie. He proposed a mining tax for the territory, which didn't make him any friends in Rough and Ready. The second event is a little more peculiar. It's the tale of Joe Swaggart and the Boston Slicker. Now, there are no photos available of Joe or the Slicker, so to keep you guys entertained, I'm including some screen caps for the 1958 TV show Death Valley Days, which actually did a reenactment of this event. TV was a little different back then. As the story goes, there was a resident of Rough and Ready named Joe Swaggart, that's him on the left. Joe had a claim that the whole town knew was valid. The person that they referred to as the Boston Slicker caught up with Joe at a local saloon and offered to buy his claim for an exorbitant amount of money. To help prove the validity of the claim, the Slicker even offered to pan the claim himself. An agreement was drawn up that if the Slicker pulled out more than $200 worth of gold in a day, he would buy the claim outright. However, if he drew out less than $200, he would keep that for his effort and walk away from the claim. Joe, knowing well and good that a claim could easily draw out more than $200 in a day, agreed and signed the contract. The next day, the Slicker set to work panning in the stream. The day went on, and he drew more and more gold out of the stream. The closer he got to $200, though, the slower the Slicker worked, until ultimately he gave up. The next day, the Slicker set to work. My bad. Joe was furious, and he insisted that he finish the day's panning. The Slicker simply stated that the contract did not define what a day was or how long he was to pan for. Technically, the Slicker was 100% correct and within the bounds of the contract when he had just finished, and then when they had finished weighing the day's take, he was just under $200 richer. Joe was not happy, and neither were a lot of the members of the community. They knew that the Slicker had conned Joe, and they wanted justice. Frontier justice at the time was very hard to come by, and the closest law of any kind was way over in Marysville, some 30 miles away. And they knew that the contract would hold up anyway in a court of law. So that evening, fed up with the taxes and fed up with the taxes being proposed against their riches and fed up with the lack of justice that would benefit them, on April 7th, 1850, the citizens of Rough and Ready gathered together and voted to secede from the Union. They elected a president, Colonel Ebenezer F. Brundage, who drew up a manifesto, a Declaration of Independence, as it were, and he also drew up a constitution, which brought forth a legislative body, a law enforcement body, judicial body. It gave the right to free speech and religious assembly, And it even stated that all mines would be taxed on their worth. So apparently the people of Rough and Ready weren't against taxes, just union taxes. And the very next day, the fine residents of Rough and Ready escorted the slicker to the edge of town, and I assume they politely told him never to return. And so it went in the newly designated Republic of Rough and Ready, the first break in the solidarity of the Union, a teeny tiny nation unto itself, for almost 3 whole months. Rough and Ready was a mining community and presumably loved a good party. In addition to celebrating their own independence, as July 4th approached, the residents of the town started to make plans to celebrate the Union's Independence Day as they had done every year. The problem was that the booze for the party had to come from bars and saloons in neighboring Grass Valley and Nevada City. When the residents went to go purchase it, they were turned away as foreigners. So as the story goes, they marched right back into town, had another meeting, and this time they decided to rejoin the union with full benefits thereof, including the right to go buy some hooch. And thus brought a close to the short-lived secession of the Republic of Rough and Ready. Later that year, California would become the 31st state admitted to the Union, and within it, the town of Rough and Ready. It remains the last town of Rough and Ready in the state of California, and on the last weekend of June, everyone is invited to come up to Secession Days, complete with music, games, a chili cook-off at the firehouse, and the annual staging of the original saga of Rough and Ready melodrama. And if you think that after all this I'm not going to be in attendance, you're all bananas. So let's raise a glass to Rough and Ready, the tiny mining town with the independent spirit of the New West. A town that just wanted to be left alone until the booze ran out. And in this COVID world, can you really blame them? To Rough and Ready.